Hey folks, Eric Stakelbeck here. Welcome to another Watchman Newscast live stream. We're coming to you live every single day during this Israel-Hamas war. And where do I begin? They beheaded babies. There are reports right now out of southern Israel that the Israel Defense Forces have discovered the bodies of some 40 Israeli babies who were beheaded by Hamas. And that's where we begin today's live stream. Just in case you had any doubt about what Israel is up against and the demonic evil that Hamas represents, as they swept through in a stunning invasion of southern Israel on Saturday, they reportedly beheaded babies. Also burning children alive, reportedly, marching, and we've seen this footage. And the thing is, folks, it's, as someone made the point this morning, it's not like during the Holocaust or during World War II, where the full scope and the scale of the Nazi atrocities only became apparent at the end of the war and things were being uncovered. And when the American GIs liberated the death camps, then they saw. This is happening now in real time. And now that everyone has cameras, and thanks to Hamas themselves, who've been posting this barbaric footage on all of their social media accounts and blasting it across the world, we're seeing in real time exactly what went down. So in case you had any doubts about what Israel is up against, there you have it. They beheaded babies, and they did so gleefully, did Hamas, this Iranian proxy. They burnt homes to the ground with families inside. They burnt little children alive. And you've seen the footage, courtesy of Hamas, that they have posted, again, gleefully and proudly on their social media accounts, of little children as young as 3 years old being marched over the border captive into Gaza. Who knows what their fate is? I'm a father. I have two daughters. Who else out there is a father, a mother, a grandfather, a grandmother? You know how it is. Holocaust survivors were marched across the border into Gaza. Who knows what their fate will be? Are they in the bowels of hell right now, in some decrepit tunnel with a Hamas gun trained on their heads? Likely. This is what we're up against. This was a modern day pogrom, equivalent of any kind of the atrocities that the Nazis, Israel right now, and Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, said this yesterday, Israel right now is fighting Nazis. They are fighting the modern day equivalent of Nazis. That is what Hamas represents. These are atrocities on the scale of what we saw in Nazi death camps. All that was missing was Dr. Mengele walking around southern Israel and leading the Hamas hordes. This is what we're up against. And I say we, I'm not Israeli, but I consider myself someone who lives in the free world, at least for now, if we can keep it here in the West, and who stands against demonic barbarism, which Hamas represents. So that's how we start the newscast today. I just wanted you to know, I'll say it again in case you're just joining us and you missed it. Hamas beheaded babies, reportedly as many as 40 babies. I hope the reports are wrong. Look, reportedly, I hope it's wrong, but more and more sources are saying that this is what has been uncovered in southern Israel. Some more numbers for you as we break down things. And yes, I'm a bit passionate about this, and as you should too. If you have a pulse right now, this news and these images should outrage you, no matter where you live in the world. If you have a pulse, if you have a soul. But here's some more of the numbers we have. Again, and did I mention Holocaust survivors dragged over the border as well? 85 years old, who survived the horrors of Hitler, now to be accosted by the modern day Hitlers. Yeah, just a reminder. But in terms of numbers, an Israeli kibbutz, and folks, I've spent so much time along the Gaza border in these kibbutz, these great Israeli communities. They're beautiful, beautiful communities, unfortunately in the shadow of Gaza. But Be'eri, 100 dead in Be'eri, which was kind of along with that rave party where 260 young people were slaughtered. Be'eri is kind of the epicenter of this Hamas invasion that was perpetrated over the weekend. 100 dead at least in that kibbutz. And kibbutzes are small communities, folks. 100 dead. Of course, the rave, 260 dead. More numbers for you. Over 900 Israelis overall slaughtered. Over 900 dead. The largest slaughter of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, since World War II in one day. 900 people in a 2 or 3 day span. 2 more killed today, by the way, by Hamas rockets near the Gaza border. And here's a number for you. 126 Israeli soldiers killed. 126 IDF members killed. And folks, look, the title of this live stream today is Israel Prepares Ground Invasion. You've got 126 Israeli soldiers killed. In a nation the size of Israel, that's a lot. That's a lot for any nation. Israel's a nation of 9 million people, about 7 million of them Jews. So 126 IDF soldiers killed. It's a big number. And as I mentioned a minute ago, the ground invasion has not started yet. And the ground invasion's coming. And Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, said today, we're going on the offensive. This is it. The airstrikes are around the clock right now, kind of softening these Hamas positions and paving the way for the ground invasion. I don't know how Israel's going to do it, but they're going to do it, and they must do it. This evil will end once and for all. Hamas signed its own death warrant, and the ground invasion's coming. But I mentioned that 126 Israeli soldiers killed. That number, it's going to increase when the ground invasion begins. Israel knows that, and Israelis are prepared for the cost of eliminating Hamas once and for all. I don't know what the ground invasion is going to look like. I'm not a military strategist. I interview military strategists in Israel, around the world, all the time. Former, current Israeli military officials, defense officials. They're brilliant. They were completely, let's just say in an understatement here, caught off guard on Saturday morning with this Hamas invasion. And that will be discussed at a later date for sure. There will be recriminations and hearings and everything else in Israel. But right now, in real time, Israel is united and focused on the task at hand, to the point where there may be a temporary unity government forming, where all Israelis, after the discord and disunity of the past year, thousands and thousands in the street demonstrating, which certainly, and again, I said this yesterday, I'm not blaming the demonstrators, but I am saying Hamas, the outside perception of Israel's enemies was, wow, they're very divided right now. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Maybe now would be a time to try something like this when Israel is distracted and divided. I'm not saying that. Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian regime have said that publicly in advance of this Saturday attack. But that's out the window now. Israel is united across all stripes. And they're ready to do what needs to be done. An unprecedented terror attack requires an unprecedented response. Deterrence is done. The old way of, well, we'll carry out airstrikes and we'll deter Hamas, only for Hamas to live to fight another day. It's out the window. It's done. It's a new day. Again, Hamas, and an Israeli official said this, Hamas opened the gates of hell. It's really where they emerged from. And now they'll be driven back there for good. They're done. And what I'm hearing coming out of top Israeli officials, and for TBN over the past few days, we've been interviewing and lining up interviews with people in Bibi's cabinet and talking to them, getting reports. What they're saying and the seriousness, folks, look, I interview Israeli officials at the highest level on a regular basis. These are serious dudes and brilliant. I've never seen or heard just their countenance, the resolve that I'm hearing now, I don't want to say bitter resolve, but a righteous anger. And they're basically saying, we don't care what the world thinks right now. You can howl and gnash your teeth and levy more UN resolutions against us. We don't care. We're going to do what needs to be done. We just suffered a massacre on our soil. Israel's 9/11, Israel's Pearl Harbor. We are going to respond accordingly. And the old way of doing things, the old quote unquote status quo, is out the window. And Ron Dermer, Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, very close to Bibi, arguably his top advisor, said yesterday, look, we need, if we don't respond accordingly, and folks, picture this, the Middle East is a region, the world's most chaotic and volatile region. The Middle East is a region where strength is respected. You might say, oh gosh, that's so archaic, and oh man, I don't like that. But that's how it is in the Middle East. The strong horse is respected. If Israel responds here half-heartedly, massive airstrikes, and that's that, and agrees to a ceasefire, Iran and Hezbollah will be licking their chops, and Hamas will live to fight another day and replicate what they did over the weekend. And more than that, Hezbollah, which is a much more powerful fighting force than Hamas by miles, will replicate that in the north along the Lebanon border. Israel and Israeli officials, and this Benjamin Netanyahu has said this over the past few days. Let's recap. He said, our operation here is going to change the Middle East forever. It's a big statement. If you destroy Hamas, you change your immediate neighborhood. You don't change the region. Changing the region entails destroying Hezbollah and sending a message to Iran directly. What that means directly, by directly, I don't mean an invasion of Iran. I mean, does Israel ramp up attacks against Iran, indirect sabotage, and things of that nature like we've seen over the past several years? We're going to change the Middle East for generations. This will be a generational kind of war that changes the game forever. That, I told you, the resolve, the righteous anger, the focus, that is what I'm hearing from Israeli officials. That is what they are transmitting. Things will never be the same. They're not going back to the status quo. Just so everyone watching knows, the Middle East will never be the same after this. And arguably the world. We'll see where this goes. Prophetic implications? Absolutely. We'll talk about that more before we're done. Let me take a breath. Thank you, everyone. We have people from around the world joining right now. We have a live chat, very active right now. Thousands with us. Before we're done, we'll have thousands more for such a time as this. And we have people from around the world. It's a lively chat. Any trolls, any anti-Semites will be ejected, just a heads up. But keep the chat going. Welcome, everyone. If you are new to this channel, welcome. We're doing this every day. Monday, hey, during a time of war, during a historic event that we're witnessing right now, we're doing this every day, Monday through Monday, every 7 days a week. We'll be with you. So if you have not subscribed, give us a subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're at practically 720,000 subscribers for such a time as this again. And it's going to grow, not because of anything I'm doing, but because we're getting a message of truth out there. We are not, if you're new to the channel, welcome again. A few things you should know real quick, and then we'll get back. Number one, we're not going to mince words. Just so you know, we're not going to mince words. I have the unique combination of being a Philadelphia native and being filled with the Holy Spirit. To me, that's a pretty strong combination. I'm not going to mince words. I'm going to tell it like it is. So know that, number one. And number two, this is a channel that, yeah, we're going to mention God and we're going to mention Jesus. And if that turns you off, I'm sorry, but this is a subject, and everything going on in the world right now, quite frankly, that's a spiritual battle. We're talking, you know, in the natural right now, military, and we're going to talk about it more in a minute. Update from the north as well, Hezbollah. But folks, at the end of the day, this is a spiritual battle. They're beheading babies. That's demonic. There's no other word to use for it. So if you don't see that this is a spiritual struggle, I'm sorry, but you're in one, and you're about to really become attuned to that, I think, more and more in the days to come. I'm not religious, quote unquote. I'm all about a relationship with the Lord Jesus. So yeah, we're going to drop that name, Jesus, on this newscast from time to time. And we're going to talk about God and what the Bible says about all this, because at the end of the day, there's no political solutions here. It's a spiritual battle. Okay, got that out of the way. To the north, as I just gave you the updates, 126 Israeli soldiers killed. The Hamas rockets continue to rain down from Gaza. Israel is preparing a ground offensive. We don't know when. And look, Israel was surprised, obviously, but Israel also many times, with brilliant operations on the military and intel front over the decades, has also hatched the element of surprise on its enemies. The ground invasion may occur at a time you know not. Everyone's thinking, when people are asking me, when are they going on the ground? Right now, a ground invasion takes incessant planning. And listen, Gaza is the most populated strip of land, densely populated strip of land in the world, 2 million people crammed in there. And Hamas has an intricate labyrinth of underground subterranean tunnels dug throughout the Gaza Strip. That's number one, where they're popping out. It's like something out of a horror movie. What we saw over the weekend was literally something out of a horror movie. But they're popping out of these tunnels. Every single building there is booby-trapped, number two. Number three, they use civilians as human shields. Not only do they have hostages, some 130 hostages, and I'm an American, including some U.S. citizens reportedly. And by the way, 11 U.S. citizens killed, slaughtered over the weekend in the Hamas massacre. And double, by the way, Joe Biden may be speaking right now. I'm not sure. This may be counter-programming, but he's supposed to deliver remarks. I waited as long as I could. He still didn't come out yet to deliver those remarks. He apparently talked to Benjamin Netanyahu today. So if he is speaking now, chat, let me know, put some comments up there, and I'll unpack it as best I can, because I'm not watching him right now, because I'm speaking to you, and I'm glad I am, and I'm honored to be speaking to you right now. But Gaza is booby-trapped throughout. The human shield factor, they're going to use hostages as human shields, number one. Number two, they're going to use their own people. The great representatives of the Palestinian people, Hamas, have no hesitation, no compunction in sending their own people to death, women, children, Palestinian women, children, and using them as human shields. And the Israel Defense Forces, and if you're new to this channel and you don't agree with what I'm saying, right now, here's something that's really going to anger you. Sorry. The Israel Defense Forces, in addition to the U.S. military, is the most humane fighting force in human history. I repeat, the Israel Defense Forces, along with the U.S. military today, are the most humane fighting forces in human history. So Israel has very strict rules of engagement where they go to incredible lengths, to the point where they will put their own soldiers in danger to avoid civilian casualties. I don't know that will be Israel's mind frame right now. Israel right now is saying, this is different. First declaration of war since 1973 by the world's one and only Jewish state. That's where we're at. But Gaza is, how do I even describe it? The level of evil and Hamas fortification inside the strip that Israel is going into. But I believe they go with God Almighty behind them, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're going to do what needs to be done, which brings us to the north. I have so many notes here, folks. I just go off the cuff. I'll glance, and I don't want to miss anything to fill you in. And again, if Biden is speaking now, please comment. Let me know what he's saying, because I'm focused on you guys and gals right now. But to the north, Hezbollah. Okay, the big update there. That's the two questions I'm getting the most here on the newscast over the past few days since this all launched. Number one, what will Hezbollah do? That's what everyone's wondering. And number two, what does this mean prophetically? So let's unpack that a bit. And send along your questions. I'm going to try and get some questions here before we go. Number one, what will Hezbollah do? I believe there's a very good chance Hezbollah will eventually throw its hat in the ring in this war. Let's give you a little background real quick on that. Number one, since 2006, Iran has held Hezbollah in reserve. Remember, Hezbollah is Iran's most lethal and effective proxy. Some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel, which, by the way, reminder, if you don't know a lot about, if you're tuning in right now and saying, hey, this Stacklebeck guy seems to know what's going on in the Middle East, I'm going to check him out. Well, here's a fact you should know if you don't know a lot about the region. Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey. Again, the size of New Jersey. I've spent a lot of time in Jersey. I'm a Philly boy. And I can tell you, Jersey, you can travel it very quickly in one day from north to south in a few hours. And you can do the same in Israel, from north to south in about 7 hours. So that's Israel's geographic limitations. And it's surrounded right now by a ring of fire. That's what we've called it here in the Watchman newscast, the ring of fire, whether it's Hamas and Islam, the Iranian ring of fire. The head of the snake is in Tehran. And we'll talk about ultimately dealing with the head of the snake and holding them accountable in a minute. Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, further south in Yemen, the Houthis, to the east, those Iran-backed Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. And then you have the West Bank, so-called. I call it Judea and Samaria. It's the biblical heartland. And if the Bible calls it Judea and Samaria, that's more than good enough for me. So here in the Watchman, we call it Judea and Samaria. Number two, the eastern half, the Palestinian-dominated half of Jerusalem. Do they flare up as well? Iran's been instigating acts of terror there, a terror wave for months. So Israel's surrounded by a ring of fire, and again, the size of Jersey, but to the north, Hezbollah. Iran, as I mentioned a minute ago, has held Hezbollah in reserve, waiting for the exact, in their view, perfect moment to unleash their most lethal proxy, 150,000 rockets and missiles, probably at least 40,000 well-trained, battle-equipped foot soldiers. Perched on Israel's northern border, they rule southern Lebanon with an iron fist. They've got very likely precision-guided missiles, which do exactly what their name says, PGMs for short. They're designed to hit targets with greater accuracy and greater precision. And I think of Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor in the Negev desert. I don't even want to think about it, but precision-guided missiles, let's just say, for Israel are a non-starter and an absolute red line. And the reason you've seen so many Israeli airstrikes in Syria over the past several years is because the Iranian regime continues to attempt to transit precision-guided missiles and PGM parts through Syria into the hands of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And I would imagine they've been successful at least some of the time, although Israel has done an incredible job of really denting and weakening the Iranian military machine in Syria and the Hezbollah military machine there as well. So Hezbollah is a formidable foe. They're not a state actor. It's not a nation state. They're backed by a nation state, the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism, Iran. But nonetheless, Hezbollah is one of the most lethal fighting forces in the entire Middle East, better equipped, better trained, and more dangerous than some nation states' armies in the Middle East, including, by the way, the very nation where they're based, Lebanon. Hezbollah is stronger than the regular Lebanese military forces. So when Hamas, as we've seen the past few days, is dangerous and lethal enough. It's a massive issue. Hezbollah is another level, folks. So Iran has held them in reserve. And I just laid it out for you, the abilities of Hezbollah. So you can see why the Iranian regime, Hezbollah's master, which founded Hezbollah in 1982, which is armed, funded, supported ideologically, everything. Hezbollah is an arm of the Iranian regime. It's basically Iran West in southern Lebanon and in the suburbs around Beirut and in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. Even more so than Hamas, which is also an Iranian proxy. Islamic Jihad in Gaza, also an Iranian proxy. But Iran has said, wow, Hezbollah is our crown jewel. We're not just going to throw them out there kind of willy-nilly. We're going to wait to the exact perfect moment to unleash them. And why could this be a moment? And again, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but it could happen. And I say that because if Israel does what I strongly believe it's about to do, destroy Hamas, Hamas ceases to exist in any sort of way where it can pose any kind of threat to Israel. Yeah, you might have some operatives running around, but Hamas as a credible military threat, security threat to Israel ends. Hamas as we know it, destroyed. If Israel indeed is about to do that, is Iran and Hezbollah going to allow that to happen? Are they going to sit idly by and watch their ally and proxy? And look, Gaza has been a thorn in Israel's side for years and a distraction. And it's another front to cause Israel trouble, as Hezbollah could potentially rain down rockets and missiles. So if Gaza all of a sudden is not a threat to Israel, then Israel can focus all the more on the threat to the north in Lebanon and Syria. That ain't good for Iran and Hezbollah, because all of a sudden the onus and the focus is on them, and Israel's attention is trained on them when Gaza no longer poses a threat. So, folks, what do you think? I'd love to get your comments here. Would Iran and Hezbollah stand by and let that happen? Because there's reports that Iran is pushing Hezbollah to be ready to get involved. And if they see Hamas in its death throes, ready to be wiped out, does Iran say, now go? Let's bail out our boys and Hamas and Hezbollah get involved. It's a good chance. We're seeing, I'm not saying it's definite. If Hezbollah knows what's good for it, it wouldn't, because it would be a twofer, folks, in my opinion. Israel would take the opportunity to destroy Hezbollah. Hamas and Hezbollah, picture this as horrific this weekend, the pure, it's the definition of the word evil, what Hamas has perpetrated here. If any good can come out of this, it would be the complete destruction of Hamas and perhaps Hezbollah. And then you really do change the region, as Netanyahu said Israel is about to do. But listen, folks, I've been speaking to Israeli military officials, former military officials for years. You watch the Watchmen show. You see me on the Gaza border. You see me on the Lebanon border. You see me on the Syria border. You see me with Israeli military strategists, analysts. You see me all over the land. You see me in Iraq, Jordan. I'm all over the region. And the Israeli military folks I talk to say, look, the next Lebanon war, as I said about Gaza right now, Israel's extraordinary rules of engagement in terms of civilian casualties, everything else, that's not exactly going to be in play. We are going to unleash hell on these people, meaning Hezbollah, in the next war up north. And it's going to be bloody and nasty, and we are going to decisively defeat Hezbollah. Folks, we may very well be, if Hezbollah gets involved, we may very well be on the verge of seeing Hamas and Hezbollah completely destroyed. Where does that leave the Iranian regime? Again, Hezbollah is its crown jewel. And folks, I'm telling you right now, over the past 2 days, we reported this on yesterday's live stream, by the way, and double, by the way. If you miss any of our newscasts, any of our live streams, you can join us here anytime. On our homepage, we've got it all right there in our archive. So do not miss any of it. Every day we're coming to you. Hey, many times our newscast will go for 10 to 12 minutes a day, a commentary. I'm in the studio. There's more bells and whistles, but you're here for the content, not the graphics, the bells and whistles in the fancy studio. So with the live streams, we're a little more down and dirty off the laptop, but you know what? It's all about the content and the information that you're getting. So again, you can find it all right here under newscasts in our archives, along with a bunch of other programming I think you'll enjoy. But what does Iran do? If Hezbollah and Hamas, that's a new Middle East. And that brings us, before I come to the prophetic angle, that brings us to the past 2 days, the events we've seen with Hezbollah. Now, the United States is warning Hezbollah to not get involved, to not escalate, to not expand this into a multi-front war, to not ignite that entire ring of fire. The U.S. is sending, obviously, naval destroyers to the region. The White House was lit up in blue and white last night. That's great. In honor, in solidarity with Israel, that's great. But when the rubber hits the road, let's see what happens. The U.S. has been sending, or is about to send, munitions to Israel to help bolster Israel's forces. Hey, amen. I've been very critical of this current administration in Washington, D.C., and for good reason when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to its Israel policies. But now the rubber is hitting the road, and we'll see what they do. We'll see if they truly step up to the plate here with Israel and stand shoulder to shoulder, because you know the world's going to start howling, folks, and gnashing its teeth once Israel goes in harshly in Gaza to destroy Hamas. When the rubber hits the road, will this administration in Washington still be standing alongside Israel, or will it jump into the chorus of people saying, Israel, this is disproportionate force. We need a ceasefire now. I wasn't encouraged by the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, tweeting out the need for a ceasefire. Even before Israel had a chance to respond to what happened on Saturday, he later deleted that tweet. And I wasn't encouraged and have not been encouraged over the past few days of this administration in D.C. saying, well, we don't know that Iran was involved. We're not quite sure. Folks, look, common sense, although we live in times where common sense is not so common, common sense, if you know the region at all, of course the Iranian regime was involved in the planning of this onslaught. We reported here on the newscast many times. Go back and look in our archives. I said that something big was coming. Hamas is looking for an escalation, I think 2 weeks ago. Why did I say that? Because Hamas leaders were meeting with Hezbollah leaders and Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps officials in Beirut on several occasions. They weren't getting together to plan a picnic and talk about the weather. They were planning an offensive against Israel. This is what they were planning. And Hamas leaders said as much over the weekend. Iran, according to the Wall Street Journal, I don't know what you think of the Wall Street Journal, but on this, they're solid. It was solidly sourced and reported that Iran greenlighted this operation last Monday, a little over a week ago. And now Hamas leaders yesterday are saying, well, Iran didn't know. They didn't know. It was all, of course they're going to say that. Because now, if they telegraph the fact that Iran was involved in the planning of it, the head of the snake, again in Tehran, then Iran will be held accountable, as well it should. Folks, think back to 9/11. I'm coming from a U.S. perspective on that, obviously. Okay, the Taliban in Afghanistan harbored al-Qaeda and was involved and they knew what was coming. They allowed al-Qaeda to train, plan, plot, etc. on Afghan soil. What did the United States do? They held the Taliban accountable for harboring al-Qaeda. Same with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel has been very clear to the Lebanese central government, look, we're going to hold you accountable as well because you're harboring Hezbollah. Iran may not be physically harboring Hamas and Hezbollah, the entire entities on Iranian soil, but man, oh man, all roads lead to Tehran when it comes to regional and global terror. They must be held accountable in some way eventually. It doesn't have to be militarily even. The U.S. could sanction them and sanction them some more so that regime collapses once and for all. That wicked regime collapses. I love the Iranian people, by the way. Folks, the Iranian people are incredible. It's a Bible land. When I talk about Iran, I'm talking about the regime. The Iranian people are a proud people. It's a biblical land. Think of Mordecai, Esther, Darius, Cyrus. It's a Bible land. And I hope and I pray one day it's a Bible land once again. But right now, it is under the rule of a tyrannical, wicked regime that has its jackboot on the necks of its own people. But a message must be sent to this regime, and it can be sent through soft power. Sanctions, cutting off oil shipments, cripple the economy, and topple the regime. It can happen. It doesn't have to happen through an invasion. It can happen through, look at how the Soviet Union collapsed. We've been calling for that strategy for years with the Iranian regime. Inspire modern-day Lech Walesas. Get behind them in the United States. The West should get behind these folks. It's another story that we'll get to, but it can be soft power, quote unquote, that leads to the demise of the Iranian regime. If only the West had the will. We'll see. It's the moment of truth. The rubber's hitting the road. Folks, there's really no gray areas here. Either you're with Israel in this or you're against it. Either you're with good, you're with evil, you're with civilization, or you're with barbarity. I don't see any gray areas here in this war, in this conflict. They're beheading babies, Hamas terrorists. They're burning children alive and burning families alive in their homes. It's a pogrom, a modern day pogrom. They are Nazis, just in different uniforms. So you better take a side because there's really not a gray area here. And I hear marchers in New York City and London and Sydney, Australia, pro-Hamas marchers saying in Sydney, Australia, that the Jews should be thrown into the ovens in a, quote, westernized nation. No gray areas. And you might think you can sit this one out, but sorry, it's a battle of good versus evil. The prophetic angle, then we got to get out of here. Number one, I read an interesting report yesterday that Israel, through back channels, has told Hezbollah, if it gets involved, that Damascus could be targeted. Alarm bells go off to anyone who knows the Bible, Isaiah 17. The book of Isaiah, chapter 17, verse 1. If you don't know it, check it out now. It says that a day is coming where Damascus will become a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. Folks, look, Damascus is one of the greatest cities in world history, one of the oldest inhabited cities in world history. Even the Mongols did not completely destroy Damascus. And yet, The Bible says that a day is coming when Damascus will cease to be a city. That's number one. Number two, many have commented on Psalm 83. Some believe Psalm 83 was fulfilled in 1948, some 1967. Some say it was just an intercessory prayer, and some say it's yet to come. Some say it's happening right now, and Psalm 83 is kicking off. Something to keep an eye on. Bill Salas, a friend of mine, I've had him on the show. He strongly believes Psalm 83 is yet to come and that we may be in it right now, the beginning stages. But something I know for certain is Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog. If you're just joining us, you might say, the war of Gog and who? Funny name, I know. Go check out the book of Ezekiel. Check out chapters 37 through 39 in particular. It speaks of a latter days, TTER, end days, latter days invasion of Israel, led by Russia, I believe, along with Iran and Turkey in the mix as well. And could the seeds be laying for that right now? Look, final thought here. If Israel, destroys Hamas, destroys Hezbollah, makes Syria pay dearly, and gives Iran some very big lumps as well, and perhaps Iran's nuclear facilities, would that be done now? I don't know. Is that another date? I think that's a collision coming. Israel cannot accept, obviously, nuclear Iran, and they won't. That's a non-starter. It ain't happening, as they say, and Israel will strike those facilities eventually. Will it all lead to that during this current engagement as it escalates potentially? I'm not sure. But I look at the war of Ezekiel 38 and 39 from Iran's perspective as almost a war of revenge in their view, where they say, look at what you did to us, to our proxies, and now, and Russia, look, Russia is our ally, and Russia is a strong ally of Syria for decades, and we're pulling Russia down with us, and that hook in the jaw of the Russian leader who comes on down. You might say, what's this guy talking about? How do we get the hooks? Read Ezekiel 38, 39, and you'll see what I'm saying. So we've got things being laid out right now. And if you might say the Bible's a bunch of fairy tales, you know what? Fasten your seatbelt is what I have to say. And I take no joy in saying that. And we're in the days is what I'll say. And folks, even people I speak to who aren't believers. I had a guy working on my house last week, nice guy. I wasn't a believer. I mean, he was pretty clear about that. And I said, man, we're in the days. I mean, these are the days. Even people who are atheists today, I think instinctively feel an unease in their gut and say, ooh, this isn't good. It's going in a very bad direction. Yeah, it is, but not all bad. We can be light in the darkness as Christians, as followers of Jesus. We can be light in the darkness. If you're not a follower of Jesus, welcome anyway. Everyone's welcome here. If I'm saying for me personally, that's where I stand. I make no bones about it. I'm not going to deny the Lord because he would deny me in heaven, on the day of judgment. So that's where I stand. I'm proud of it, and I'm going to share that. That's the perspective I'm coming from. So God still sits on the throne. He's in control, and put your trust in him, focused on faith and family, and focus most of all on him. Faith, family, and freedom, the three F's. That's what's going to get us through. Faith and family and preserving our freedoms. And as believers, stepping up. For me, I want to be an ambassador for Christ, no doubt, and be a truth teller and educate people, inform people. And we're going to continue to do that here. So just something to encourage you as I leave. The book of Joel. Oh, he's talking about that Bible again. Yeah, I am. The book of Joel. So you've got some homework today, by the way, before we come back to you tomorrow on the live stream. You got to read Ezekiel 38 and 39. You have to read Psalm 83, and let me know what you think about Psalm 83. And you have to read Isaiah 17, verse 1. Many of our viewers have already read them backwards and forwards, I know, but maybe you haven't. Check it out. I'm going to leave you with this to encourage you about the ultimate outcome for Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian regime. God has the final say. The book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 2. God says, and I quote through the prophet Joel, God says, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's in Jerusalem. It's really a valley within a valley. It's in the Kidron Valley in Jerusalem. I'll bring all nations down to the valley of Jehoshaphat on the day of judgment. There, God says, I will put them on trial for what they did to my inheritance, my people Israel, because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. So, folks, literally, as my esteemed colleague Ron Burgundy might say, that's kind of a big deal. God and Israel, when it comes to God's economy, his prophetic time clock, Israel's kind of a big deal. What he's saying is he will literally judge nations on how they treated Israel in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in Jerusalem. So listen, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, they're going to have their day even before that, where there will be consequences, let's just say, but an even bigger eternal consequences coming one day soon in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Hey, we're kind of on fire today, right? And if you're not on fire about this, then you must not have a pulse. No offense. But if you're hearing what I'm hearing, and we're all seeing it, right, on Hamas's own social media accounts, and your blood's not boiling and you don't have a righteous anger, then I don't know what to tell you. But here on the newscast, keep it every day this week for a live stream. We're going to tell it like it is. And if we didn't, you wouldn't be here. So keep it right here for all the latest news that matters to you on this Israel-Hamas war. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you